Good afternoon, everyone. You are watching the Ask Mobile Lunch Hour Live. I'm getting ready now to share this with my page. There we go. Dr. Waller and Judge Dumas, you can share it on your pages too, if you so desire. I watch what people are saying on Facebook so that I can talk to them during the show itself. So let me just go ahead and do this. It's a whole production going on over here. I've got 3 screens happening at once. So I just want to make sure that everybody gets to, there we go. There we go. Facebook. Make sure we're doing this properly. There we go. I see everybody. All right. I can talk to folks now in these Wakandan streets. All right. Good afternoon. Let me just double check this to make sure. No, I don't hear it, Dr. Waller. So I just want to make sure you're okay. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Lawful Sanders, and I am your host on Wednesday afternoons for the Ask Mother Lunch Hour Live, a show that is aired each Wednesday for the Philadelphia Sunday Sun on behalf of Catherine Hicks, its publisher. On behalf of the Philadelphia Sunday Sun, I'd like to thank you for joining us as we highlight women for Women's History Month because it is March, and we continue to look at the people that we've not ordinarily paid attention to that are always inside doing amazing work. Last week we had local reporter Cherry Gregg on, and this week we are talking to Judge Lori Dumas and Dr. Ellyn Jo Waller, both women who have been in the forefront of the human trafficking conversation here in Philadelphia. I am going to give you the disclaimer and then introduce these 2 fabulous sisters, because they are fabulous sisters, and then I'm going to read a short article to you about human trafficking, and then we're going to get into our conversation. I need you to buckle up because this is not going to be one that is peaches and cream and light and fun, but the fact of the matter is our children, the black and brown children, are the ones most likely impacted by human trafficking, even though it's happening all around the world. I just saw an article about a conversation about Jamaica, that human trafficking is happening there, and it's a hundreds of billions of dollar business. It's like modern day slavery that no one really talks about, and the people that are impacted and the people that are actually doing the trafficking would surprise you. So let me go ahead and share the screen and do the disclaimer so that I don't get Kathy in trouble, because you know. The advice offered during the Ask Mother Lunch Hour Live is intended for informational, entertainment purposes only. Use of this broadcast is not intended to replace or substitute for any professional, financial, medical, legal, or other advice. If you have specific concerns or a situation in which you require all of the above, you should consult with an appropriately trained and qualified specialist. The Ask Mother Lunch Hour Live, its host, the Philadelphia Sunday Sun newspaper and publisher, are not responsible for the outcome or results of following any advice in any given situation. You and only you are completely responsible for your actions. And then I'm going to introduce these 2 ladies because they have absolutely earned the right to be introduced the way I am about to. Ellyn Jo Waller, EDD, is the partner in marriage and ministry of Reverend Dr. Alan E. Waller, senior pastor of Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church. They are proud parents of Ellen Morgan. Her husband is Corey Johnson and Erica Lynn. Ellyn Jo is passionate about combating human trafficking, education, and lifting the lives of women. She began conducting research into the issue of human trafficking in 2005. Wow, that's a long time ago. We write that down. And traveling to learn best practices towards its eradication. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, let me run on over here to Judge Dumas so that I can get into this real good conversation. Judge Dumas returned to Philadelphia with her law degree and opened a neighborhood law practice where she handled various types of cases for everyday working people. She was proud to serve her neighbors and did so with the utmost professionalism and a zeal for justice. It was through these experiences that Judge Dumas sharpened her legal skill set, and the words "and justice for all" became even clearer. While serving in family court, Judge Dumas established herself as an innovative leader in guiding the city of Philadelphia in its creation of the first judicial juvenile human trafficking court, which provided services to youth that had been victims of commercial exploitation. She led many of the initiatives that were created to enhance the work of the court and to ensure that system children were the beneficiaries of some of the most innovative and effective services to lead them to success. And so I am going to go over here now and read a small article that was written by the Philadelphia Tribune. Harmeet Kaur, November 4th, 2019, this was written, and it mostly went unheard. The chilling story of Jamie Kloss, the 13-year-old Wisconsin girl who was kidnapped after her parents were killed last year, was national news. But people might be less familiar with the story of Ariana Fitz, a 2-year-old who went missing in 2016 before her mother was found brutally murdered in the San Francisco Bay Area. Each of these cases is compelling, but the two didn't receive the same amount of media attention. Some experts believe it is because Kloss was white and Fitz is black. In fact, data shows that missing white children receive far more media coverage than missing black and brown children, despite higher rates of missing children among communities of color. The FBI's National Crime Information Center database lists 424,066 missing children under the age of 18 in 2018, the most recent year for which data is available. About 37% of those children are black. And even though black children only make up about 14% of all children in the United States. This was an article that says black children go missing at a higher rate than white children. Here's why we don't hear about them. And so I'm coming back over here to these two amazing women. Good afternoon to the both of you, and thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
You're quite welcome. Good afternoon, Judge Dumas.
Good afternoon.
So I deliberately picked the both of you. Dr. Waller, I watched you getting an award with Susan L. Taylor the same day where women, I won that same award that you won. I can't even remember it now. From WDAS. You know what I'm talking about, the award? Yes. And so Susan L. Taylor won her award that same year. Women in, I can't remember, oh Lord.
I think it's Women of Distinction. Is it Women of Distinction?
No, it wasn't that. And I won the same award. I can't remember it now. From WDAS. And
that's because you win too many awards. That's the issue.
Oh, Lord.
Both of you.
And Susan L. Taylor from Essence Magazine had won an award the same day. You got up on the stage, Dr. Waller, and you blew her away. And she said, this woman is local. I know her husband, but I didn't know she was doing all of this work. And then Judge Dumas, I had no idea you were her partner. You know, Philadelphia is such a small place, but and inclusive at times, but then there are times you don't even know the things that are going on around you. And so I have a few questions for you. So let me show you this. I have you on so that I can honor you for Women's History Month. This is why you're here, right? And then we're going to talk about human trafficking. Why did you get involved in it? And what do we need to know, right? So, please let the people know how you got involved in human trafficking. And bear with me, a friend of mine just died suddenly, and so I am a little bit out of sorts and probably should be under my bed right now, but I'm continuing the work as we move forward. But I did some research here. So how did you both get involved in human trafficking? The conversation around it.
Dr. Waller.
Okay. So first, so sorry to hear about your loss. And just a wonderful testament, but sometimes here's my caution. So after we finish this, you better go somewhere and sit down.
I'm getting into bed, man.
Take care of yourself.
Yes,
but a wonderful, just an example of the ways in which we as women of color, we as Black women, even in the midst of our own personal tragedies, sometimes push through so that we can be a blessing to others. And so kudos to you, my sister, for acknowledging your pain, but also pushing through to do the work. And it was the Women of Excellence, the DAS.
Women of Excellence, yes.
So back in 2005, as a result of our partnership with the Lot Carey Baptist Foreign Mission Convention, at that time, it's the Lot Carey Baptist Global Mission, the Lot Carey Global Missional Community now. The executive secretary treasurer, who was a friend of ours from way back, asked me and two other pastors' wives to begin doing some research around the issue that he had learned about while traveling the globe. He was in Amsterdam and heard about the issue of human trafficking, actually heard from some victim survivors. And he came back and he was like, we've got to figure out what we can do as this global Christian community that is looking to empower our brothers and sisters where they are. So not come in and tell them what to do, but to come into where they are already doing and provide assistance, resource, etc. And so I began doing research in 2005. In January of 2006, traveled to Amsterdam and South Africa on the same trip. So that was kind of crazy because it was like freezing in Amsterdam and then, of course, blazing hot in South Africa. And then that next, like March, went back to South Africa, was just so very compelled by the issue. I tell this story often. Dear friends of ours and now pastor of Ellyn Tabernacle, Western Cape, Pastor Jacobus Namdo was speaking at a conference. It was Shared Hopes Conference back in 2005. And I went to the conference as part of my research. And so listening to him speak, he is a preacher. So he said, if everybody can turn to Psalm 94:16. And it was as if, at first I thought it was my glasses, but it wasn't my glasses. Those words lift off the page. And it really gripped me, blew me away, really caused me to think deeply. And I honestly believe that moment was the calling in my life to come to this work. In the Message Bible, it says, who will stand for me against the wicked? Who stood up for me against the wicked? Who took my side against evil workers? And when I start thinking about that, for me, those words lifting up was like, here I am in a moment learning about a horrific crime and then reading the words of scripture that are saying, who stood up and how dare I not stand up? As I further researched, learned that the average age of entry was between 13 and 14, and my girls were 13 and 14. So then, of course, like the mama bear came out. And then Judge Dumas will tell you how I think I probably drug her into this too.
So our story is a continuation because Dr. Waller then began to minister to the women of Ellyn Tabernacle Baptist Church about her research and about what she had found as it related to trafficking across the globe, but also that through her studies, she was finding that it wasn't just across the globe, it was right here at home. And so she began a ministry in our church called She's My Sister. And I became a part of that ministry because I was intrigued. I too had young girls and I wanted to know more. And just like her, there was something that was just tugging as I began to realize, with the stories that she was telling us that, hey, these are our girls, these are our kids, girls and boys. Mm-hmm. And she's very convincing, I will tell you, because once she pulls you in, you're in. But for me, it was her pull, but then it was also that internal thing that I too said, you know what, this is what I want to do. And so what I began to do is, as we ministered at church through our activities and our initiatives, and wrapped our arms around those victims at the time that, Sister Waller had identified, I began to then search in the court system because I was in family court at that time, because I wanted to know if we had these kids in our system. And lo and behold, when I began to ask questions, I began to find that we had kids right in our system that were victims and were not being served at all. And so it was just a natural, marriage between church, community, and court. Really, it is really how we built our coalition to serve those victims that became known to us.
Mm-hmm. So here's what that follow-up question. What have you found locally in the work as it applies to, because there seems to be many girls and women especially missing in the city of Philadelphia that folks, I know about 5 personally, right? they just kind of disappeared off of the face of the earth. They got up one morning, their siblings and their parents said they went off to do something, go to work, to school, whatever, and they're missing, and no one has been able to find them, and then they drop off the radar. What have you both found locally in the work here in Philadelphia as it applies to human trafficking? What are the stats that has surprised you about what's happening here in Philadelphia?
Well, I can tell you that between the years of 2011 and 2015, we served about 100 youth that were from Philadelphia that were trafficking victims. And I realize that, you know, we all seem to attach this traveling or this movement as it relates to our understanding of trafficking. But I will tell you that all of the babies that I served through our court, they were right here. So they weren't missing, so to speak. I mean, they may not have been in their homes, but they were here in the city of Philadelphia. And you know, I will say that the problem is that once they are become kind of trapped in that life, the reason why it looks like they're missing is because most of this is done in secret. So they're in boarding homes, they're in, you know, hotels, and so they're not in their homes, but they could be around the corner, but you don't see them because most of it is done in the dark. Most of it is you know, and so we found a lot of our victims through things through law enforcement. When they were actually going after adults for crimes, we began to find our kids on these crime scenes that really lots of times had nothing to do with trafficking, but that's what we found when the stings actually occurred. We would find sometimes 5 and 6 young ladies in hotel rooms. And so, and social media also gave us that, you know, although I think Sister Waller and I talk about the internet being the devil, because I definitely think it's the devil, but we were able to get good information on our victims because they were posting our young people for sale on the internet.
Wait a minute. Wait.
Yeah.
And we're grateful that site doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
But we're confused that the ways that they continue to do it still exist.
Yeah. So where were
actually the 4th in the nation for trafficking cases, to kind of contextualize it for you.
Say that again.
In 2019, Pennsylvania was 4th nationwide for the number of active criminal human trafficking cases. And that was getting to the federal court. So that's not even talking about what Judge Dumas is talking about and what she was involved in, because those weren't necessarily federal cases. And so if you look at those statistics just strictly based upon federal cases, you know that we were inundated. If Pennsylvania was number 4, you know Philadelphia was feeding that number in ways that are unimaginable.
So answer this for me, because you know now you all woke me up in my grief, because this is unconscionable and it's a tragedy. How do they get their victims? How do they bring their victims in, and where are they selling them to? Where are they going?
So they're not necessarily selling them to places. So one of the most difficult issues, components, if you will, of human trafficking is if you think about the sale and use of illegal contraband. You can only do that one time. You can sell a gun once. You personally, it might be sold by other people multiple times. You can sell drugs once. You can sell a person over and over and over again. And what Judge Dumas was alluding to was, it was called Backpage. It was an internet site where you could just type in what you wanted and a picture of a young woman would pop up. Typically the age, of course, would be not a minor, but you could look at we women, okay? So we all know what a baby's body is and what a woman's body is. And so much of the photographs were of babies, you know, teens. And of course it said they were 21 or older, but we know the difference. And so one of the things that part of the work that we were doing in looking to reach out to persons being victimized was, along with the Philadelphia Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition, kind of you type in your zip code and page upon page comes up and face upon face would come up. And it would help us to identify locations of where we could minister and provide whatever the necessary resources or what.
This is insane to me. So what you're saying is, if I'm hearing you correctly, is they bring these young girls in, hide them away right in front of our eyes, right? They're in hotels, they're in boarding room houses, which is why people who are renting these spaces have to ask questions and pay attention to what's going on around them. And those who live in the communities that are seeing these strange faces coming in and out of homes, or watching them go in and never seeing them come out for months at a time. We have to look for the signs of those things so that we can start to pay attention to whose children are missing, right? So they put them in these spaces and then they, quote unquote, sell their bodies for use. Is that what they're doing? Okay. So how is it that human trafficking has got to be such a large business? Hundreds of billions of dollars exchanging hands. What is at the crux of this? Who are the people? Because one of the things that I've learned is that the people who are committing human trafficking look like you and I. They're judges, they're doctors, they are policemen, there's not a particular look for the person who is doing human trafficking. So what are the signs? What are the things should we look out for signs of human trafficking possibly happening right under our noses?
Well, there are, every case is different, but I know that when we talk to community members, we tell them, first and foremost, the first sign, is when you see, these young ladies with grown men like that, and we always talk about, we have to be careful though, because it's not just one sign. You got to look for more than one, because we have some women in our ministry that, every time they saw a young lady with a grown man, they would automatically think it was trafficking. So it's not just that, but that, that's when you begin to kind of look, and it's of course how they're interacting with each other, right? Because typically, these traffickers and these pimps, who could be anyone, and they don't have to be men. They could be women, they could be men. Like we've seen them all. And, it's how they're interacting. Are they overly protective? Does it look like some kind of romantic relationship? And we're not talking about, 20 and a 20-year-old and a 25-year-old. We're talking about 14, 15, and 30. The differences in ages, are just ridiculous. And so, because the grooming process with these older men or women, what they do is they sense vulnerability in these young people, right? And they prey on that. And we, as we've seen videos of actual pimps who have talked about, if they were in a mall and they would see, a group of young people, they knew how to spot the one that was the most vulnerable, because if she's not sure of herself, if she's, looking down, if he's approaching her and she's acting shy and she's looking around or really seeming like she's really kind of needing that attention he's giving her. At that point, he said he knows he has her. And that's where, so it's malls, it's anywhere that young people congregate, is fair game for these predators. I mean, anywhere, and even in church, right? And so, and we talk about that because, a lot of predators, and we see them, we see the stories about how, you have these coaches and people who are entrusted to supervise kids, that those are breeding grounds for this type of behavior. And so you have to pay attention. A lot of our girls had a lot of tattoos. There were drug issues. There were recent and continuous trips to the medical centers, because of course, if your body is going through all of this trauma, because we're talking sometimes 20 to 30 times a night that young people, these women have, these young ladies, these children are having, are being exploited. And so imagine, as a grown woman, I mean, we can't even fathom what that trauma is like to the body. And so there are always, continuous trips to to the medical centers, and when they're allowed to go, because sometimes they don't even get to go. You know, there are sometimes multiple abortions because there's usually no protection that's used. And so it's really a community of people who are aware, because of course then our medical people have to be, our personnel have to be aware, you know, our transportation, like, you know, our trains and our buses and our airplanes. Like, so as we have gotten more educated as a society, I will say that more partners have really bought into what their responsibilities are to look for the signs and then to report, you know, things that look suspicious.
Yeah. Dr. Waller, what have you seen? Because my brain is not able to compute being sexually assaulted 20 to 30 times per night. We're all women, all three of us. We can't fathom it, right? And so not only is it the physical trauma, it now becomes the emotional trauma. So what do you see in human sexually trafficked victims in terms of their behavior as a direct result of being traumatized this way?
So often, and those that 20 to 30 is because of the financial quota. So we have to remember, you tie all of that back to the multi-billion-dollar industry that human trafficking is. And so just direct contact and working with victim survivors, you have all manner of things. You've got the depression. You have sometimes acting out, even sexually, because I'm being forced. I'm going to try in my head, and often you're dealing with young people. In my head, I'm going to take control, you know, and decide that I think what I'm doing is me taking control. Just the distrust of authority, the distrust of others, often self-debasing activity, self-mutilation, just really the torture of self because you were being traumatized and tortured. We had in our conference this January a young lady who was a survivor, and she was sharing about just something we in the trafficking world, the lexicon has lots of words that people usually don't talk about, but this young woman talked about the trauma bond that was associated with her trafficker and herself. And even after more than a decade of separation, when she found out he died, she cried. And she was angry at herself for crying. But it is your body's response. Your body takes on a response to trauma. And she didn't want to cry. She was so angry at herself for crying. But your body responds to trauma in ways that you can't control. And so a lot of the acting out that we might see in young people, the feelings of worthlessness, the feelings of competition and anger toward peers and so forth, because that's the way the system is set up. The system is set up, you've got one on the top who's in charge, if you will, who often is forced to do some recruiting. So it's not just someone who comes along and snatches a child. We've seen persons and have talked to persons where actually one young lady we know well was her first pimp at the age of 14 was her boyfriend's grandmother in North Philadelphia. And so you begin to think about the ways in which these twisted systems function.
And how pervasive they are, right? The people you would not even think would be a part of this.
I met a young lady from Maryland. Her maternal grand aunt was the family trafficker. So she had trafficked generations of young women in the family, but nobody talked about it. And that's the biggest issue. It's the not talking about it. It's the not being honest about the things that we're facing in general. But things like that are, it's so very important for us as a community to be focused on lifting up one another, protecting one another, and being honest in the community. And as Judge Dumas said, you know, there are people who are entrusted to with the care of children who aren't right, you know, and then get twisted around enough that then they think what they're doing makes sense.
So I'm listening to the both of you, and something is clicking in my brain. Those children that were being trafficked, many of them grow up to be adults who are trying to live normal lives now. And the behaviors, the self-debasing behaviors continue. So usually in a boy, if a boy is trafficked as a young person, one of the self-debasing things that they do is that they can't keep a relationship for a long time, right? They're over here with this one, over here with that one, and they always want to be seen as accomplishing and doing things without trying to work through the issues that they have. I also see a lot of alcoholism, right? Because, you know, I'm grown now. I went to college. I did good things, and I'm trying to get rid of this thing in the back of my head. But often they don't go to counseling, and so alcoholism and the self-debasing behaviors, and even what we would consider the petty attitudes, show up when we are going. But you're adults. You're supposed to know better. This is why knowledge is key, right? When we think about these things. So, Judge Dumas, listen. I am hearing these stories. How do we? It's a business that's been going on, and let me share this with the both of you, and I'm sure you all know this. These are the 11 facts about human trafficking. I'm only going to read about them. It is estimated that internationally there are between 20 million and 40 million people in modern slavery today. Accessing the full scope of human trafficking is difficult because so many cases so often go undetected, something the United Nations referred to as the hidden figure of crime. Estimates suggest that internationally, only about 0.4% of survivors of human trafficking cases are identified, meaning that the vast majority of cases of human trafficking go undetected. Human trafficking earns global profits of roughly $150 billion a year for traffickers, 99 billion of which comes from commercial sexual exploitation. Globally, an estimated 71% of enslaved people are women and girls, while men and boys account for 29%. That is just a small snippet of the 11 things that they had there. What can the average person in the community? Someone just wrote here, you just triggered a memory for me. One of my former students' mom's girlfriends was trafficked, and her other young women in their small community. That was back in the 90s. I didn't have a name for it then. And so what should we thank you for sharing that, Bernita. What should we as the average community members look for? Because you're right, Dr. Waller. We see the grandmom. Nobody's thinking grandmom such and such who's making all the pies and mixing up the Kool-Aid and telling all the community children to come and hang out would be the one that would be trafficking children. What should the parents look out for, and what should the community members look out for?
So the issue is that a lot of this stuff starts with things that are potentially going on at home, right? Okay. Over, I would say probably 98% of our victims, one of the highest risk factors is that these children have been sexually abused at a young age. So we've had victims that have been sexually abused from the ages of 2 and 3. And so that places them in a higher risk category to be trapped in this type of lifestyle because the trauma is already there. So the layers of trauma just continue to build and build and build. And so, and you know, statistics show that once a child is violated sexually, their developmental process stops at that point. Their body continues to grow, but their developmental process stops, which is why you see potentially, not everyone, adults that seem to be very immature. Like when you talk about not being able to make good decisions, you know, and you may, I'll say when I talk to people, I'll say, you may even have people you work with or even your girlfriends that, I said one girlfriend that for some reason acts so childish. And, you know, at some point it gets on your nerves, but I said, it could be somebody that had, you know, it doesn't have to be, but
Right.
It could be, right? And so we have a lot of adults walking around with all of this pent-up trauma and all of this stuff that happened to them at young ages that they, you know, they're like, you have no idea. They're a shell over brokenness that, you know, just has never been addressed. And so what I think prevention is the key, that we've got to take control of our homes again. We've got to make sure that our children are safe in our homes, in our schools, and in our community, because, you know, if they are nurtured in the right way, if they are kept safe, then the risk factors that they would end up in this lifestyle decrease dramatically. And I will say that the success rate of those young people that we served in our court was much higher for those young people who had a village. Right?
Yes. Yes.
And so we've got to get back to that village mentality as it relates to our children, because, you know, the internet, everything that's external in this world that is negative is pulling them away. And because we're busy, because we have other stuff going on, we have our own stuff, we tend to allow the world to raise our kids. And that's where the danger begins. And honestly, once it gets to a certain point, there's very little that you can do, because the world's grass, as you know, is a firm grass. Those things are bright and shiny, right, that are attracting them to things outside of our home, which puts them in danger. And so I tell parents and people who just have kids in their lives, you've got to make sure, you know, don't be afraid to, first of all, don't be afraid to parent your kids. That's the first thing. You got to be a parent. Don't be afraid to parent. You're not their friend. You are not their friend. And so don't be afraid to parent. And then for those of us who come in contact with kids, you know, give them a space to be able to talk, to use their voices, right? Because if we don't do that, we'll never hear what's going on, because kids will tell it all.
Yes.
Give them the space.
Yes.
Right, Dr. Waller? They will tell it all. I'm going to let Dr. Waller, because I'm sure she has, you know, but we have to, I could talk about this all day long. I mean, it's just,
well, that's good, because, you know, there are people asking questions now. So I am so glad for having it, right? This was not an easy one to have. But Dr. Waller, I want to share a story with you. I have two sons. They're 25 and 29 now, both living away from me. And when they were little, I was criticized for not allowing them to spend time at people's homes, right? So if I didn't know you, I was not sending my children to you. They're like, well, they're boys. You got to let them be boys. Boys will be boys. And I kept saying, no, I'm not letting them do any old thing. As they grew and they got to 5, 6, 7, and you know, parents would call, white parents, black parents, you know, can your child come over? And I would say, I got to get to know you. If I don't know you, if I don't get a good vibe about you, they can come and spend an hour or two, but then I'm coming back to get my child. Nobody's spending the night at your house. As they became teenagers, and I'm telling you, I caught a lot of flack for this. As they became teenagers, I would say to them, if you wanted to go somewhere or to a party or something, I need 48 hours notice, and I need to meet the parents of the people. Oh, Lord, I was the worst Jamaican mama this side of creation. They couldn't wait to get out my house, right? And so their friends would always go, and then I was sitting on the school board in their community, so they were like, Lord, we'd rather die than our mother find us. So they just didn't, they very rarely asked. I am not saying that they were perfect people, but they made it through school without a suspension or detention, because they'd rather face the wrath of Khan than to have me had to show up at the school, right? They're now 25 and 29. When they went off to college, especially the older one, he called me one day and he said, oh my God, Mommy, the things that I am seeing and learning, thank you. Thank you. Even though people, you know, criticize, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? If I didn't know the parent, I wasn't doing it. We also, Judge Dumas, had this thing when they were about 6 and 9. I said to them, we're going to start having family meetings where you won't get in any kind of trouble. You can just, there's a code word you can use and say, can we talk? You know, you can tell me anything that's on your mind. So when we develop that relationship, even now as adults, they'll call and go, well, Mommy, such and such, 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 such. And I go, that's wonderful. One just got married. The other one's not married yet. But it is crucial. I agree with the both of you. It is very crucial to develop that kind of relationship from the time they were babies. Don't wait until you see something happening. I know we're tired. I was exhausted. There were days I was like, Lord, why do I have these children? Yes, and I'm going to be honest. Why, Jesus? I love my sons to pieces, but it's exhausting. I was divorced, right? And trying to raise them. And so they made it through school and college without having a criminal record, right? Doing the things that are, so it's very possible. But you are right. It is incumbent upon us, the parents, right? When we don't feel like doing the work, when we don't want to be a part of it, because we only have a small window to raise our children. And when we're tired, know the village that we can trust. And the village should not be more than 2 or 3 people, because you can't keep control of lottie-dottie and everybody. Am I making sense? Right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So Dr. Waller, Shamika says, what are your recommendations for the school community to be able to detect and or prevent our young people from becoming victims? Great question.
Excellent question. One of the things that I often say is we've got to look at the intersectionality of vulnerabilities. So for schools, really starting to think about, is this kid hungry? Is this kid absent a lot? Is this kid withdrawn? Is this kid not getting their homework done? Are they struggling in school? Do they have healthy peer relationships? Are they being bullied? So all of those things make you vulnerable. If I'm hungry, then somebody can offer me food, and that be the difference between me being safe or me being victimized. If I'm, looking at the kids who maybe wear the same thing to school every day.
Yes.
And not ignoring the fact that every day little Lisa gets to school 40 minutes late. Like paying attention to those things. I'm a teacher by trade. And I remember my first year teaching way back in the dark ages, in the 80s. What I used to do as a first year teacher, we would never let somebody do. I used to go to my kids' homes on the weekends and get them. I taught special ed, so I would do various things, expose them to things in the community, because that was how the world was back then. We can't do that, but we can be listening ears, as Judge Dumas said. Teachers being persons who kids recognize, I can talk to you. You're not my friend, but you're someone I can trust. And presenting ourselves as trusted and trustworthy individuals. Not to the point, and the flip side of that is that's exactly what traffickers do.
Yes.
So being boundaried enough and clear enough, and saying to kids, you can pretty much, and I know Judge Dumas and I have said this to many kids, you can tell me anything. I will tell your parent if it's something that is detrimental.
Right.
You fighting with Susie and Sally at school, not fighting physically, but they bothering you. You talk about that kind of stuff until it looks like it's more problematic than not. But I think one of the things that, particularly in schools, we can make sure we're doing is paying attention. Pay attention to what these kids are doing, what they're saying, and how they're acting. You'd be amazed at the level and the amount of information you can get by just paying attention, by not being that reactionary person that they're going to start hiding from. Almost become the teacher who can be the fly on the wall, where they're free talking around you, and then you pop in so they know you're listening, but pop in on certain things and not be judgmental. I think that's the other thing that becomes problematic, that those of us who are adults, those of us who are settled, and we once were kids, but we're grown folk now, and we're trying to figure out life, making sure that we are in appropriate ways clear about, hey, I didn't have it all together either. And there are people you can talk to, and encourage them to talk to their village. Don't become the confidant as the adult necessarily. Always point kids back to their families or to their support systems, particularly where those systems are healthy.
Yes.
Where they're not healthy, then that's where you encourage kids to seek help. or provide opportunities for them to seek help. We've done things like put the human trafficking, the National Human Trafficking Resource Center hotline number in bathrooms, in places, you know, being sure that we're following that same post 9/11 rule with life. If you see something, say something. Giving kids resources, giving them the opportunities back, and I know the court still exists, but also when it began under Judge Dumas, giving them those kinds of resources, helping kids to know there are trusted people you can talk to that can help you, and providing those types of resources. Don't try to be the savior of the world yourself.
Yes.
But seek help and collaboration and point kids in a direction where we know they'll be safe, that they can receive help, and that they can grow beyond their circumstances.
What is the phone number to the human trafficking hotline?
888.
Go ahead.
You know, we both know it like the back of our head. 888-373-7888.
7888. 888-373-7888.
Yes.
Human trafficking hotline. All right. So.
And you don't have to be sure.
And you don't have. There you
right.
go.
So don't get caught up in. Judge Dumas mentioned we had some folk, you know, once you learn something, you're like, oh my God, you view everything through a certain lens. But the gift of the hotline is you can call the hotline. It's connected. They connect you to the local law enforcement, to the FBI, to the folk who actually know what they're, not that people don't know what they're doing, but what they're looking at, who've had the opportunity to unfortunately see enough cases to know those kinds of things. The other thing, and Judge Dumas said about the internet being the devil, kids should know that when you take a picture and post it, you're pretty much 3 clicks away from somebody knowing your location.
Say that again, please. Say that again, please. Say it again to somebody.
It's true, and I've seen it done in anti-trafficking workshops, in human trafficking awareness workshops, where federal officers have just taken a picture of, you know, gone on the internet. Here's a picture. Click, 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 click. Boom. Here's the address. So when kids think, well, I didn't take it. I didn't put in. I wasn't standing in front of the house, and so it didn't have. The internet is technology is a wonderful gift, but it is a gift to be used with extreme caution.
Yes.
And the posting, you know, one of the things I say to young people, and I say this to parents too, all this posting of your kids on the internet, there's twisted people out there. You do not want someone creating some kind of sick, twisted attraction to your child. Because you're posting them all the time.
And the other thing I tell parents all the time, stop telling your children's names on my children are called son 1 and son 2. And every time somebody tries to put their name, I erase their name. I don't want my children's names out there. So and I also warn people, don't come on my page and then try to friend request my children, because they always send to me and go, do you know this person? Because they want, like, you have to really raise aware children. Raise them aware so that they understand. Lord, this conversation is so good. We could go on for a long, long time about this. Here's my next question, and maybe Judge Laura, you can answer this. Sakina Love is someone you both may know, who says that she was in the church. Her parents were pastors. She's a pastor's kid, deacons, whatever. She was in school and being human trafficked, right? Right there, she was going home every day. But she had a man that she thought she was in love with that was human trafficking her. And this is what's happening to a lot of women in the city of Philadelphia and around the world. Here's the other question that I have, and maybe the one or the both of you can answer this. So we have 10 minutes left. Lord help us, Jesus. I need more time. I am seeing a lot of Asians being trafficked as slave labor. And usually when I go into the nail salon, I had this one lady, she still haunts me. She kept trying to, she said, I can't speak it. They don't treat me well. She kept trying to get me to help her. So I would, she gave me her phone number to text her son. And she says, we work long hours. In her broken English, we work long hours. They don't feed us. So is there trafficking in the sense, not for sex, but for cheap labor too, happening around us?
Yeah. Human trafficking encompasses both labor trafficking and sex trafficking. Mm-hmm. Dr. Waller and I can say me, I'm not sure how much labor trafficking Dr. Waller has been involved in. I only have the bandwidth to deal with the sex trafficking, because the labor trafficking is a whole nother animal. And yes, that does exist. And it does exist. We see a lot more of immigrants that are involved in the labor trafficking, because they are promised, employment, they're promised, a better life. And then they come and their travel documents are taken lots of times. So, even then their families are threatened and they're in a strange place. So they have nowhere else to go. And so that is very prevalent all around the world, of course, but right here in Philadelphia. And as we were learning, about human trafficking as a whole phenomenon, we learned a lot of those, places where you do have people who are in the service industry, right? And once again, it's about paying attention. It's about, trying, whatever the only thing you can do at this point is call a hotline, because, these rings are so sophisticated. And then, you may identify with someone. If someone had seen, her trying to connect with you, you may go back there next week and that person's gone, right? And we'll never see them again because they've shipped them, somewhere else. And so, even the domestic help, you have people that come and they're not paid fair wages, right? They're basically,
or they
like
make
slaves.
them au pairs. Yes. Or they make them au pairs. Yes.
Right.
And they're usually, I see them Rittenhouse Square, in the more high profile, wealthier places, and you see them pushing the prams, and they look sad and miserable, and I wish, and not looking you in the eyes. They're giving, I'm telling Dr. Waller, I know you don't know me, but your husband will tell you, I speak it. I speak the truth as I see it, right? And so we want these immigrants from wherever to come and watch our babies and clean our homes. We're not paying them anything, with the promise that they will help them to get their papers here to stay here legally. Let's call it what it is.
Absolutely. We, Judge Dumas, I'm sure you remember this case. It was a DC diplomat who had a housekeeper, if you will, but she slept in like the mud room on the floor, and the way, and this is that community pay attention. The way they identified her is they would let her go to church, and there was a lady in the church who noticed her coming in a limousine every Sunday, but looking kind of rat-a-tat, if you will, like her clothes. I know that sounds like an old lady term, but just not looking well kept and always wearing the same clothes, and just kind of started talking to her over week after week after week, and finally said to her, like, where do you live and where are you coming from? And not in a judgmental way. And she was, and the girl told her the story that she was living in a diplomat's home. They weren't treating her well, like you said. They weren't necessarily paying her, so forth and so on. And they told her that if she said anything, she would get deported. Yeah. And I believe this was a dual case, labor and sex, because when he had the people over from his country, then she was,
sex slave,
had to service them. And her opening up to someone who was paying attention. And that's the thing, being open enough, paying attention enough, having your heart open to hearing what people are saying without using words. Yes. So just paying attention. So this person, this woman at the church, just is kind of like, something ain't right. And so, back to my whole post 9/11 thing, if you see something, say something. We've got to start paying attention. We've got to get out of our self-centeredness and begin to look beyond what we think. We've got to get out of our judgment, our judgmentalness. And I made that up, and I can because I'm a doctor. And stop deciding what people are, who people are, and what they're doing before you know who you're talking to. And so being open enough, being loving enough, being godly enough to look beyond what you think you see and try to make connections with people where you can, so that you might be able to notice something, help someone, and change somebody's life.
Man, I don't know whether to laugh, cry, roll, just the amount of good information that you have both given us today. Judge Dumas, you get the last word here. So we know that it's children who are vulnerable, young people who are vulnerable because they may have been sexually abused. We know it could be the grandmother in the family that has been trafficking the young folks around, that makes the Kool-Aid. We know that it's the immigrant that comes over here with the thought process that they'll have a better life, that their passports are confiscated. They're told that they have to work for a certain amount of months, days, years, whatever, before to get their papers, and that they would file for them as employers. So oftentimes it never happens and they have to run away. And that's why we see so many immigrants in the shadows living right among us now. We have to stop the judgment. You're absolutely right, because we're assuming people are coming here and they want to be lazy. You just now have a whole other side of why folks do what they do. And then there are people who are in master's programs with their family members who live with their parents, who lived amongst their parents, grew up with both parents, who are trafficked too. And so the bottom line is really work on who you are, right? What are your core values? What are the things that moves you and shifts you and shapes you? What do you believe in? What God do you serve? All those things. We all need to think of what is our higher power that we're serving. For us, it's God, right? I'm not knocking anybody. You do what you want to do, because I just want you to believe in something bigger and better than yourself. And so what advice now do you have for parents, Judge Dumas, after all this conversation? Someone who has very young children and you're just now starting out, and auntie wants to take them and uncle so-and-so wants to take them and this one wants to take them. What advice do you have for parents now?
Well, first of all, I will say that it's never too late, right? Because I think even, for me as a mom and as a judge, I thought, after I knew what human trafficking was, I thought about the many years that I sat on the bench and these children were in and out of my courtroom and I had no idea. And so there's a level of guilt that you can build up, when when your eyes are open. So what I will say is that, it's never too late to start to begin to create the environment that your children need to stay safe. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know how to, or if you don't know where to start, seek out people, and they don't have to be professionals. I mean, just anyone that you believe is safe enough and comfortable enough, and that has presented themselves as a model, where you can just go and just talk. I would tell parents, just come see me down in the courthouse. I'm there, or you can go to Enon. It was either come to the courthouse or go to Enon and find Dr. Waller. But now there are so many other advocates in the community since we started. It's not just us. I just want to make this clear. We are not the human trafficking czars. There are many passionate advocates throughout Philadelphia and throughout Pennsylvania, in particular, who really want to help make our community safer for children. So I would say, use that cell phone that you have, because everybody has one. Start Googling, services, anti-human trafficking coalitions and, advocates and groups that understand the issues of trafficking and trauma, and seek out those people if you don't have people already in your circle to help, because it does take a village. And the best parents, and we talk about it. We have a young lady, we show her video when we're doing a presentation sometimes, who was parents were, they were from an upper middle class, probably maybe higher than that family. She was in college, and she got caught up because she was a beautiful girl and somebody told her she could be in videos, right? Mm-hmm. And for an entire year, she hid it from her parents. For an entire year, because she was threatened. He had all of her information because he filled out the application for the modeling job. So he had all her information, all her parents' information. And she stayed, in that environment. This was a girl who I'm telling you, you would never even imagine. And we have those types of victims. It is, there is no respect of persons when it comes to this. And parents do what they can. Like the parents had done their job. Their girl was in college.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you can't. So it's do the best that you can. But when you know that you don't have all that you need to keep your children safe, seek out those people or those groups or those, you know, entities that can help you, because you know we are each other's people. You know, there are people who are willing to help. There are people who, you know, and it doesn't have to be a church, or you know, because people get caught up. I don't want to go to church. It doesn't have to be a church.
Right.
It could be a community group. It could, you know, it could be you. You're, you know, now that you're identifying the fact that this is an issue that you really, you know, want to learn more about, and you know, they may call you, you know, but just call someone, you know, because without that strong, positive, you know, person in, even if it's one in our children's lives, you know, as I said, the risk factors increase tremendously. Their vulnerability is just, they're just wide open to anybody and anything that presents itself as, you know, being able to fill a void.
Yeah, so you know, we are like 2 minutes past time, but it was okay. Judge Lori Dumas and Dr. Ellyn Jo Waller, I want to thank both of you. You have opened up our eyes. The ultimate goal here was to get everybody to become advocates around them. Just open your eyes and your ears. Put the judgment aside. And I've always told parents, when your children go to college is when you really should start paying attention, right? Seeing when their responses are different. If they come home differently, or they're starting to respond to you differently while they're in college, or you can't find them for days at a time. You know, you're not tracking them down, but you're paying attention because you gave birth to them. They've been around you the whole time, so you know who they are. I would like to invite the both of you back, and this is what we'd like to talk about. The biological parents that are sexually abusing their children and putting them on the internet. We talk about strangers seeing them in the mall, and we talk about this one and that one bringing them from abroad. But we also need to talk about the incestuous things that are happening in families that no one wants to talk about. We can't talk about 103, and I've got to go. But I just want to say, Dr. Ellyn Jo Waller and Judge Lori Dumas, you are two women that are shining sparkly bright on behalf of the underserved here in the city of Philadelphia. And I'd like to thank you and honor you on Women's History Month for being just that to us and so many more.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
The Ask Muva Lunch Hour Live is now officially over.
Yeah. See ya.
Thank you, ladies. Bye-bye.
Bye.